Good evening, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. This meeting takes place in the traditional and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are all treaty people. Start with the approval of the agenda. Recommendation that council approve the agenda for the January 27th, 2026 meeting is presented. Is someone prepared to move that? Moved by Councilor Strong, seconded by Councilor Babineau. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Motion carried. Approval of the minutes. Recommendation that council approve the January 13th, 2026 meeting minutes as presented. Is there a mover? Moved by Councilor Greek, seconded by Councilor Fullerton. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Motion carried. Now, we do have a few presentations tonight, so we're going to flip-flop them at this point if you guys are okay with that. So the first presentation is the Young Chefs Program. Bernice Van Laar, so you can come up here to the podium and make your presentation, please.
Good evening. Council, Mayor, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk in front of you. My name is Berenice van Leer. I moved here 8 years ago, and I call it home much longer because I came here a couple of times before and I always dreamed of moving here with my family, and this dream became true. Now, another dream was actually to do something in a community that pays back in laughter, smiles, and a lot of love. And you know what? I got this. I got this by meeting with two wonderful ladies and much more, and setting up a program that we call Young Chefs. And what I say here at the beginning, the way to the heart is through the stomach, is our program. So who's driving this? This is Amanda, who is also in the crowd here. She's an instructor. She is the brains, believe me, she is. And she's a humanity lover. Then we have Laura, who's also in the crowd. She's our instructor too. She's a networker and an absolute plant/planet lover. And then there's me, Berenice, who's an instructor and mainly an absolute cook nerd. I love cooking, and I love cooking with others and for others. Mind you, I chose probably the wrong profession because I'm a technical translator, but that's fun too. And now we have one more person that just joined us, Kelsey, who is not here today, but we're very proud to have her on board. Why Young Chefs? I mean, this whole idea became 2024, just came to life because Amanda and I were just talking with Laura, picking up our kids and just saying like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have something, where we can teach the children how to do stuff and, and cook a little bit and help them to understand what the purpose of cooking and good health and good nutrition is. And that's what happened. We just started this little program. I will say that a couple of times during this presentation. It's completely free for the kids. So we don't ask for anything, just for them to join. So why? Because many kids don't learn how to cook. They don't. The school has no cooking programs. Kids don't have the time or the possibilities to cook at home because parents are very busy. Because many kids don't know what a healthy diet is. I don't have to explain that, do I? They don't get a proper meal at home. We absolutely know what's going on at the moment. So this is a very important topic, and it really speaks to my heart and to the hearts of my fellows. Because kids eat sugar, salt, and processed food. They're generally disconnected from food. When I do the cooking sessions with our kids, I see that very often, that they don't know how to peel a carrot, slice an apple. And they often feel excluded. Pandemic didn't help, let's be honest. But many kids do love to engage in hands-on activities, like to socialize. They like to experiment. Cooking is experiment. And they need to help sometimes at home too. And they need and love to eat. So we have started this with a network called Food Vibes. They helped us secure a kitchen space at the Riverport Community Center and gave us a monetary head start. Model provided a 1,000 recreation grant, and we started a lot of sessions. The number crunch is coming. So synergies, that is my focus here, synergies by providing maybe more possibilities for the kids to learn how to cook, how to feed themselves healthily and so on, is by maybe a contributor would be the town of Lunenburg with kitchen funds, ingredients and utensils, the farmers market, Indian Garden farms, sorry, the food forest, even restaurants getting included. We have a lot of restaurants here. Why Lunenburg? I mean, because there's a lack of youth programs here. There are no cooking-related classes available. It would be an easy access for a lot of children from the area who do not have the means or the possibility to travel all the way to Riverport. And the opportunities to engage with local chefs and restaurants. I mean, that's the source we have there. So a little bit of a number crunch, because I like to back it up with some numbers. So far, we provided in the fall 2024, in our first session, 4 sessions with 12 kids at the Riverport Community Center. In the winter 2025, another cooking class of 4 sessions with 12 kids. Fall 2025, another cooking class aimed at teenagers, made 3 classes at the old academy library. That was a challenge because there's no kitchen. We still managed it. It was a full success. And then December 2025, we did a bacon session with 24 participants. That was the idea, to have kids, teenagers, parents, and grandparents all to come together and bake together some cookies for themselves, for their loved ones. But also we gave some of these little, these little packages to We Feed Lunenburg with some cookies. So we cooked with, in total, and I think it's more now because the last session has already happened. We cooked with, 56 children so far and teenagers. We received loads of feedback from happy young chefs, even happier parents, and God, you can see it in my face, and very, very proud trio that instructs. The next was actually the winter 26. It already is ongoing, and we have even a waiting list for this one. Again, it's in the Riverport community. So the knife skills is what we learn. We learn how to cook without processed food. We learn how to socialize again, come together again, laugh together, make mistakes, break eggs, separate eggs, break more eggs, be among peers, learn from each other, talk about food in different countries. That's a very interesting aspect, because we had, I think, 5 or 6 different countries now, kids from all over the world that come and want to try out stuff. Very funny, kids learn to stay focused, because their focus, really, when they cut an onion, you should see them, it's like the tongue comes out, and it's really, really fun to watch. They learn what's in season. They learn new textures and flavors, and they spend time unplugged. They don't need a phone there. All they need is a knife, chopping board, and some ingredients. And yes, more, but we come to this. They learn how to make a mess and clean it up. They learn how to cook very easy recipes and how they can make them at home for their families, for their friends. They learn how to be creative, and they learn how mental health and and healthy bodies work together. We are inclusive there because everybody has a chance to wave a knife and everybody can chop something and everybody is included in this program. They learn healthy behaviors. They learn what it means to be in a community, to socialize. And finally, and this is really working, no screens, no screams. So in a nutshell, this is for free, this program. We do that since 2024 for free for the local kids. We would like to have a pilot program in Lunenburg this winter, maybe February, March, something like this. Maybe 2 classes around 2 hours each. We'd like to teach 12 kids. We'd like to cook and eat together. And we'd love the council to come and try out what we cooked. And we want to get seasonal and local ingredients. And now let's come to the thing. Because actually, what we need from the town of Lunenburg is a dedicated space to cook. We need a bit funds for ingredients and kitchen utensils. And as again, it would be nice to have the council, even all of you, we can cook enough for all of you, no problem, that pops by and tries our results. And here, so it's basically 2 requests we have. So the first one is to do this session and to show you how successful this is. The second one is dreaming, hoping. With $250,000, we could make all this and so much more happen. And yes, that's a high number, but why not? We could have a space of our own, have a fully equipped kitchen, 1 oven, cook stove, fridge, etc. We could organize cooking parties to help kids in need. Again, we're talking here about kids, teenagers. We could get utensils and kitchen supplies like pans, pots, baking sheets. We could have a proper food storage, not our pantry at home. I have so many pots at home now. We could open a youth center, maybe in the old fire hall or in the basement of the old academy for kids to gather, socialize, and find a safe haven, because that's what they need. We could literally bring together the community by connecting young, still young, and the young at heart. And we could feed more kids because they are our future. And this is all for moments like this. And I just want you to see these pictures. They are not AI generated. These are real, proper pictures of children focusing, concentrating, laughing, trying out, helping each other. So you see sometimes a taller kid standing there because they can reach a little bit better the pot or something. It's these moments that make us continue. Yes, there's more pictures, exactly. And with these pictures, I want to say thank you, and I'm open for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Does anybody around the table have any questions they'd like to ask? Good.
I just wanted to clarify the use of the word, because I'm on the Lunenburg Academy Foundation. The use of the old academy, is that referring to the Lunenburg Academy? Or?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor.
Hi, thanks very much for the presentation. It was your passion is very obvious, and it's lovely to see what you've been doing with youth in the area, you and your colleagues. I guess I'm just curious about a few things you mentioned. Food Vibes, is that an organization of some sort, or is?
Well, it's not really, it's not an organization. It's basically, it's a gentleman that started this idea of Food Vibes, and he supported us with a Riverport Community Center. That's why we can use for free the kitchen there. And yes, and they made a lot of this possible. Thanks to them, we could actually pull that up. But it's not a club or anything like this.
And I guess, yeah, so so you've been doing this for a little while. The use of the utensils and so on, are those things that you've been able to acquire or to make use of that are at the hall that you're currently using? Or do you have some other, have you purchased some with the grants, or how does that work?
Well, most of this stuff is basically by us provided. So, I'd like to collect these little stamps. I'm not saying anything, just little stamps. And then we go out and get the pot or the pan. Yes, that's how we got help from the library because they had a little bit of a fund, so we could get some knives and some chopping boards, but we don't have a lot our own. We always have to borrow it.
And I just hesitate to ask this, but it's just gnawing at me, so I feel I have to. Knives and children make me a little bit nervous. I don't know if you've ever had any issues with that. I know my granddaughters have special knives. They have knives that like they're plastic blade, and they can still cut things, but it's harder to cut themselves. Are those sorts of things you've thought about, or is that anything you're familiar with?
Absolutely. No, this is a very good point. We are super vigilant when it comes to the usage of any tool, whether it's a knife, a scissor, or anything. We explain them at the beginning of each session, how we walk with a knife, if we have to walk with it, where to place it, and how we handle it. We, so far, knock on wood, we never had any incidents with knives, because the kids, I think if you give them the possibility to express themselves and to actually use something, they were always said like, no, you can't, and it's like fire and everything. They grow, maybe not in height, but inside, and so they are very responsible when they use the knife. So we never had anything.
I'm sure your instruction and supervision is key to that. So that's wonderful. No, and I think it's a great opportunity. I think it would be lovely to have more children have the chance to experience the benefits that you've described. So thanks very much.
Any other questions at this point? Councillor Fullerton?
Not question as much as comment. Thank you for doing this. This is great. And thank you for bringing this to our attention. And, we wish you luck. And there may be organizations within the community that can provide a space for you.
So I guess my question to you would be, so basically what you're asking is for a complimentary use of our kitchen at the community center for a couple sessions, 2 classes, and so maybe 6 or 8 times between now and say into March or so. Is that what you're requesting?
So yes, 2 sessions basically, because it's a bit a time crunch here. We do that normally in the winter and in the fall, because the summer the kids should be outside and playing and not standing in the kitchen and cooking. Yes, we would like to have the community center, but as I said, the community center kitchen, I had a look at it, and there's room for improvement, let's put it this way.
Yeah, the kitchen certainly needs some upgrades if we're going to use it as a commercial kitchen down the road. But I guess my question is, because we're into February, you might as well say now. So is your request tonight for someone on council to make a motion to give you free use, work with our staff to give you free use of the kitchen for some sessions? Is that what you're requesting?
Yes, free use of the kitchen and funds to do that.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's a great program. I remember when I was young, much younger, going to school, we used to have home economics. So even some of the basic things, as I'm not a chef, that I make, I remember I learned in home economics in grade 10 and 11 at Lunenburg Junior Senior High School. Without that, I would have had no real cooking training growing up. So I think it is a great program, even if it's just teaching younger folks the basics to cooking, right? So, I know I went to university. I couldn't eat macaroni for 10 years after that, but I could definitely make macaroni. So, I think it's a great course. It's great that kids that aren't involved in athletics or into the arts, for example, it gives them something else to turn to as well, because everybody thinks there's a lot to do because there's so many athletic programs and opportunities and things of that nature. I think this is great. It opens the door for other young people as well. So I guess my question to council would be, does anyone want to make a motion at this time? I can't make a motion, so that's why I'm asking my colleagues. So sure, go ahead, Councilor Strong.
Is our kitchen certified as a, okay.
Yes, it's certified at this time, and I talking to Paul today, staff have already talked about this, and there is space available. Obviously, they have to work with our recreation director and come up with times it's already not booked. I mean, Thursday morning wouldn't be ideal, obviously, because of the farmers market, but they'd have to come up with some other times. But I guess from staff's point of view, this could be done. So it's really staff's looking for direction from us at this time.
I can make the motion. Is it in here anywhere? So I have to make it up as I go. I guess one more question. We have liability insurance over in the kitchen that would cover this kind of use. That's the lawyer. That's all I bring to council. I'm sorry. I would like to make a motion that we partner with our town staff with young chefs to do a trial run at the community center of the program run by young chefs. I guess, does that work?
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a seconder? Second by Councilor Fullerton. Any further discussion on the motion? No other discussion? Okay. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried unanimous. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Before we go any further to the really exciting stuff on the agenda, if you folks would like to take the opportunity, you guys can leave if you'd like. I mean, I see some younger folks in the audience that might not think the 6.1 is really exciting, so it's up to you folks if you'd like to hit home. We'll take a 1-minute recess. Okay, we'll go back to the meeting in 6.1. I'd like to call up former Mayor of Windsor, Paul Beasley, and his colleague to the podium from Property Valuation Services.
Is there? Thank you, Your Worship. Pleasure to be here tonight. A little bit of a hairy drive coming across country, but it's great to be here. And you didn't have to mention that mayor part. Anyways, it's great to see some familiar faces, and I think a few of you know me. And it's been a few years since we made a presentation to the town, and I know a new face in the CAO chair since the last time I presented, and for sure, and a couple other faces. But yes, I feel, or I think that I bring a unique perspective to my position at PVSC as a municipal account manager, in that I do have 12 years of elected municipal official experience. We'll leave the mayor part aside, mayor down in Windsor. But also tonight, my colleague here, Rob Tremblay. Rob Tremblay is here, and he's the Assistant Director of Appeals and Special Projects. And Rod, did you want to say a couple of words before we get into it?
I'll say good evening, and to the mayor and council and municipal staff, thanks very much for having us and giving us the opportunity to present. It's been a few years. Again, as Paul mentioned, I'm Director of Residential Appeals and Special Projects with PVSC. I do a lot of work with the CAP assessment program and our recent natural disaster file throughout the province. And I happen to be a Modal resident and live quite close by to Lunenburg, so happy to present here tonight.
Rod told me 6 minutes away. So anyways, so yes, if you can move the slide, we'll progress it. And I'll go through these slides. I know this will be a refresher for some of you, but for those of you who haven't seen one of our presentations, I'll go through it. I'll go through it quickly, ask questions by all means. Mr. Mayor, I'll let you sort of manage all the questions if they come, or we'll just wait to the end or whatever. So essentially, PVSC was created about 20 years, or I guess around 2000, when we were rolled out of government, and we are now a not-for-profit corporation. And the legislation that we operate under or are bound by is the Nova Scotia Assessment Act. We're municipally funded, not for profit, all 49 municipalities. We have a board of directors. Typically, it's around 11, 12, somewhere there. 3 typically from the ranks of municipal experience, either staffers or retired staffers. We have 3 or 4 that come from the elected municipal officials around the province. And we have 3 or 4 that are typically independent private sector professionals that are on the board. Currently, Joe Feeney from Mahone Bay is our chair, and we have CAO from Chester as on the board as well. We have about 135 employees. They live and work in 60 communities around the province, and we serve the entire province. Next slide, please. So what we do, we deliver the Assessment Act. That's our prime directive. We also administer the capped assessment program, which I'm sure you've heard about, and the seasonal tourist business designation program. We administer those on behalf of the province of Nova Scotia, provincial legislation. What we do not do, and it can be confusing at times, we have no authority to determine land ownership or the specifics of land. That's the land registry. A lot of times people contact us saying that ownership is incorrect, or the size of the property is incorrect, or whatever, or I can't find the property or whatever. And that's land registry, but we do have a hand in there or a direct line in there where we can get information. But it is the land registry that does that. Nor do we set the tax rate, collect taxes, create tax policy, or provide tax relief. That's under the purview of the municipal government here and across Nova Scotia, as well as the provincial government under the Municipal Government Act. Next slide, please. So we are required under the Assessment Act to assess property at the market value of the property. So it's essentially what a willing buyer and a willing seller, how it would transact in the market, what the price would be paid by willing buyer, willing seller, independent transaction, arm's length, that type of thing. And we set the market value, or our market valuation date is retrospective i.e. it's back 1 year. So you'll see on the slide, the 2026 assessment roll is based on a base date or market value date of January 1st, 2025. So we're 1 year back. We look back at what sales and property transactions have occurred. We don't look forward and try to speculate or estimate which way the market's going to go. We use actual data that occurred a year, at least a year ago, a year, 2 years to 3 years ago to set the market values. But we also, for the assessment roll for 2026, we continue to look at the data on the property, like if there's a permit or if we have to do an inspection or something like that. We continue to add information or to add the physical characteristics of the property right up to just before the roll goes out. That's called the state date, December 1st, 2025, just a month ago before the roll went out. Next slide, please. And we use mass appraisal principles and practices. It's the process of valuing a group of properties as of a given date, which is the base date 1 year ago, using common data, standardized methods, and statistical testing. Essentially, we're looking at the sales of groupings of properties that are similar and homogeneous in neighborhoods that are similar and the properties transact in a similar way. And we use those values and those sales transactions to determine which ways the way the market is going. And with mass appraisal, we apply that to all the properties in the neighborhood. Now, Lunenburg, town of Lunenburg, we probably have 6, 8 neighborhoods, 6 neighborhoods that we've determined are fairly similar, and that properties would transact very similar, age of properties, those types of things down in the old section versus, on the peripheries, that type of thing. So we do not set the market. We just reflect it from 1 year ago, essentially, and that's what you see in the changes in the assessment roll, which Rod will show here in a moment. And we comply with the standards of the International Assessment Association and also with the Appraisal Institute of Canada under the CUSPAP rules, which are the Canadian Uniform Standards of Appraisal Practice rules. So we'll go on to the next slide. So I'm going to pass it over to Rod. Rod's going to talk a little bit about the approaches to determining value and then take you through some numbers.
Thank you, Paul. So between Paul and Berenice, I think I have a tough act to follow here, but I have some numbers for everyone and certainly welcome some questions at the end of the presentation as well. So as Paul mentioned, within the over 650,000 properties that we place a market value on annually within the province of Nova Scotia, we use all 3 approaches to value that are sort of generally accepted appraisal practice to determine market value. So the sales comparison approach is the most commonly used for the vast majority of residential property in Nova Scotia. So this is looking at sales of comparable properties to understand the value. So looking at what is sold to try and predict what things that have not sold will sell for as of a given date, and that's that 1 year retrospective date that Paul mentioned. The income approach is very important for larger multi-family properties. Some special use properties such as nursing homes, golf courses are also valued on income, and also special use commercial properties such as shopping malls, strip malls, this type of thing, as well as some sort of grocery properties and sort of properties where we're able to predict the income and determine how those properties are going to trade in the marketplace. The cost approach is sort of a residual used when neither of the other 2 approaches are appropriate. So a really highly specialized manufacturing property, properties that are related to resource extraction, so heavy industrial, forestry properties like a sawmill, this type of thing, are often valued on cost. And within the town of Lunenburg, a little bit of manufacturing that is here would primarily be valued within the cost approach. So we receive our property sale information based on our partnership with the Nova Scotia Land Registry. So they provide us with information when property transacts in Nova Scotia. We have assessors who review sales to determine if it meets the criteria for an arm's length sale and sort of gives us evidence of market value. So if it's not an arm's length sale, it's not telling us what that relationship is. And so we want to only use market sales to determine. So an example of a non-market sale is a property that passes through an estate, or there's perhaps a partial consideration that's changing hands through to a marital separation, something like that, where perhaps, you know, half of the property has been bought out. And we consider those a sale from the purposes of, for administrative purposes, such as changing the name that's registered to the property. But we wouldn't use a sale like that in a sales analysis to determine the relationship between the previous year's assessments and what the market is telling us. So often we'll contact seller and buyer, review real estate listings to verify and update property data. In residential property, the vast majority of sales are reviewed by having a look at, I'm sure everyone in the room is familiar with Viewpoint. We also have access to the Paragon MLS system that realtors use, which allows us to often see sort of updated data characteristics for that property and make sure that what's assessed is what's correct, and that what transacted is accurate on the account, so we can then determine the relationship between sale price and assessed value. I think we'll go to the next slide. Paul talked a bit about neighborhoods already. So this is always a very popular slide, the Nova Scotia Cap Assessment Program, Section 45A of the Assessment Act. So introduced in 2005 and automatic since 2007 in Nova Scotia. So properties that meet the eligibility criteria are automatically enrolled in the cap assessment program, which is essentially spike protection that prevents increases in taxable assessment year over year, or limits them to the Nova Scotia Consumer Price Index. So in this slide, in the green bubble, we've indicated the 2026 Nova Scotia Consumer Price Index was 2.6%. That's all goods and services in the province year over year provided to us by the Department of Municipal Affairs. Last year it was a little bit lower at 1.5, but we've had quite a bit of variation in the CPI due to mainly the big spike in inflation that we saw from COVID, and that did create a little bit more variability in the cap assessments than had been in previous years. So the interesting year is the 7.7 in 2023 there, where there was quite a significant lift to taxable assessments as a result of that. There's a sample of a 2026 property assessment notice on the slide here as well. Basically, what this demonstrates is if you're eligible for a cap and the cap benefits you, it prints on your assessment notice. We're always calculating a cap in the background, regardless of whether it has a benefit or not. It only prints on the notice in the third column there if it's beneficial to that property owner, so lower than the assessed value. So in this scenario, there's a significant cap benefit. It's almost 50% of the total assessed value here. So the $226,800 is the assessed market value. That's what we feel that property could be sold for at the 1-year retrospective base date, end of 2024, beginning of 2025 for the 2026 assessment roll. The capped assessment in the second column, we would of course have information we can share with property owners internally around what year that is based upon, or what year that property came into the program or became eligible. We don't have that information on this slide, but we presume it was a few years ago where assessment lifts are sort of outstripping the consumer price index, or a greater amount. And for those reasons, you sort of pick up more distance in between and arrive at this cap assessment that in this scenario is significantly different than the taxable assessment. And I'll talk a bit about that when I do the numbers here in a moment. And then the final column just clarifies for property owners what the taxable assessed value is. So that's the value that is available to the municipality to levy the tax rate upon. We can go to the next slide. So we have some numbers for the 2026 assessment roll. One little piece of information that's interesting, and as we sort of crested the 200 billion mark province-wide with assessment gains year over year from last year, as was recently reported in our media release, there's been some really significant change since 2022, mainly due to this sort of COVID increase that we've seen and increased demand in the marketplace. And while we see some flattening of volume, which I'll talk about in a moment around the residential market, we haven't really seen any decline in price. So we're continuing to see that increase sort of hold in the marketplace. And looking at the total assessment roll from 2022 at 422 million for the town of Lunenburg to 2026, the 662, it's a 57% increase roughly over a period of 4 years. So it's just amazing, like the amount of assessment dollars that have been added in total. So again, the total assessment roll for the town of Lunenburg for 2026, 600.25 million, up from 610.84 in 2025. It's an 8.4% increase overall, which outstripped the province. So our provincial increase on total assessment was 8.2, so it's actually a little bit higher than the provincial average. Total residential, so the vast majority of the assessment roll is residential taxable, classified as residential, as is similar throughout the province. HRM has a little bit more commercial than the remainder of the province, but in the vast majority of our 49 municipalities, this is a pretty similar situation. So total residential was up 9.9% to 538 million for 2026. And that again outstripped the province a little bit. The provincial increase was 8.5% overall. The third row is a really important number, I think, for members of council and municipal staff, in the sense that this measures the impact of the capped assessment on taxable dollars available to a municipality when you go through your budget deliberations over the next month or so here. So adjusted total residential with cap applies. So this takes into account the difference between properties which are capped and have a lower taxable assessed value. So that number is 386.49 million, up from 360. It's a 7.2 increase overall, which is roughly similar to the province. The province was a little bit above at 7.5% in this regard. Total commercial in Lunenburg, 123.7 million, up from 120 million last year. So it's a 2.4% increase. And the taxable increase was actually a little bit greater in the town, 4.3% overall. And the majority of that is due to permit work, so physical changes to commercial buildings, rather than due to the market. And just a little bit more context on that I added on another slide here. We often have questions from council around value gain attributable to new growth, which is what we would call sort of bricks and sticks, physical changes, or adding things that didn't previously exist to the assessment roll. So house gets built, of course, there's a significant increase to that assessment, and that rises the total assessment roll, the numbers that I just gave you on the previous slide. But there's also market growth. So changes to the same house being worth more because the level of sales has increased year over year. So within the town of Lunenburg, with residential, the vast majority is market growth. So the same property is being worth more because the market has increased year over year. So of the 9.9% increase, 9.7 of it was market, and the remainder would be what we call permit work. So adding physical data to the roll. With commercial, it was actually the opposite. So 0.7% of the 2.4% was market growth, 1.7% was permit work. So changes to existing structures that adds value. A little bit of information on appeals. In 2025, last year, we retained 99.84% of assessed value that was filed. That number represents all of the properties in the town. So another question we often get from folks is, if a property owner appeals, how often are they successful from the point of view of the appellant in achieving a reduction or a lower assessment? And so we had 55% of appeals either confirmed or withdrawn. So we either felt the value was okay, or we had a conversation with the appellant and they agreed to withdraw their appeal once they understood maybe reasons why it had changed year over year. We adjusted 27%, so roughly a third within the town, and there's a small percentage that remain outstanding as well, 9%. This slide just gives a little bit of information on sales activity, and I did take a little bit of a look deeper into this as well, because I was interested around the change year over year. And Lunenburg's unique, where I think, having been the assessor for Lunenburg in the past, I remember doing a lot of sales work in sort of 2017, 2018, and there was a very, very active market in Lunenburg prior to COVID as well, and some significant increase that almost sort of led out in front of the province a little bit, and what we saw in a lot of other places in rural Nova Scotia. So what we're seeing here is really sort of a COVID spike. The years that are indicated on the bottom are assessment roll years. So that's important. So the 72 sales that are indicated as being 2022, those would be sales used for the 2022 assessment roll year, which occurred in calendar year 2020. And then likewise moving forward across the grid here. So 2023 would be 2021 sales, etc. So the 43 sales that were used in 2026, these are sales that have been determined to be market transactions within the town. And so it shows a little bit of a decline, but it also, this slide's not measuring volume. So even though there could be a smaller number of transactions, those transactions could represent a dollar value that may exceed one of the higher numbers in the previous slide. So it's interesting to kind of, it gives us an idea of transaction volume, but it doesn't give us an idea necessarily of total volume. We can go to the next slide. So another important part of our work annually is building permits, and we review building permits very intensely in the fall months to make sure that we're accurate for that December 1st state date, as Paul mentioned in the earlier slides. So what we're doing is assessing any physical changes up to that December 1st date and reviewing all of the permits that we receive from the town to determine if they are if they require an inspection or if they're value impacting permits. So where we get all the permits, we often get, you know, commercial signage and this type of thing. And that work is reviewed, but often doesn't indicate a value change, whereas it's leasehold improvements is another example. But there can be, of course, you know, residential new construction, renovations, or significant changes to commercial buildings will be inspected and that value added to the assessment roll. So interestingly enough, permit activity sort of continues to increase. Again, these numbers don't take into account permits that roll over an assessment year. So something that was under construction at December 1st could be partially assessed, and then the majority of the value could be added in the following assessment roll year. So this gives an idea of the sort of overall trend, especially where we're indicating 5 years. But there's a little bit more to the picture. And again, it doesn't contemplate total permit value either. So there's a couple of significant permits right now that are sort of at the application stage, as I'm sure everyone is in the room is aware, and those may impact future assessment rolls as well. Moving on to appeals on the next slide. Relatively steady appeal volume. And again, this is sort of when assessments increase more dramatically and when capped assessments increase more dramatically, we expect to see an increased volume of appeals as we did in 2023. You'll remember from my cap slide that was the year that the cap increased 7.7% with more than 80% of properties capped. On the residential side, sometimes that can generate appeal work, even though I'll talk a little bit on one of the future slides about it, but there may be a sort of a limited ability of PVSC to address the CPI as it's sort of prescribed to us by the province. So if you sit with a cap that's lower than your assessed value, the CPI has been applied to it. It's not really sufficient appeal grounds that you disagree with the CPI, because that's not what's under appeal, but rather the assessed value. And we have to sort of test that market value. So 51 appeals in 2025. And I think I already gave the numbers on amended, confirmed, withdrawn on those appeals. So we are currently in the appeal period. Appeals must be received by February 12th of 2026. A couple of things that I always mention when I do these presentations is we always welcome contact from property owners at any time during the year. It doesn't have to be limited to the appeal period. We receive, of course, an increased volume of calls when we send 655,000 assessment notices out on January 12th. We staff our phone system appropriately for that throughout this month, which we sort of call the inquiry period. Property owners are welcome to give us a call and discuss sort of whether an appeal is appropriate or some of the reasons why their assessment may have changed. But that option is, of course, available to all folks who own property in the province annually. Another thing I sometimes mention is even outside of the appeal period, we're always working in the future assessment roll year. So even if it's June and tax bills are out and property owners have questions for PVSC around why the numbers on their tax bill might have changed, they're outside of the appeal period for that year. So there may be a limited ability for us to make changes at that point to that existing assessment that is affecting that tax bill. However, we can always look at future assessments and have a conversation about why was there an increase? What are some of the challenges that they're having with sort of understanding why things have changed on their property? And we're happy to have that conversation at any time during the year. This is just a reproduction of the snapshot from the cap slide where there's a significant advantage here. What's interesting is the orange box is what's under appeal. When a property owner exercises the right to appeal, they're appealing that market value. If you honestly don't feel the property could be sold for what it's assessed for, that's when it's time to have a conversation with us and talk about, what's appropriate. The capped assessment can't be appealed. We review the cap for correctness. So eligibility and determination that it's calculated correctly as part of every appeal review, but we can't change the consumer price index, for instance. That's prescribed to us. And if a property owner feels that it should be 1.5% again instead of 2.6, it's not, we have no legislative authority to change that. So what's important here is even if a conversation was had with PVSC or we enacted into a formal appeal and the assessor made a recommendation to lower that $226,000 value, it may not actually impact taxation, because I would suggest that unless there's a significant physical problem with this hypothetical property, it's not likely to drop below the cap, which is half of the assessed value. So that's an important, as you talk with constituents, that the assessment may move, but it may not actually have a tax impact in some scenarios. And we're happy to chat about that as well, when we talk with property owners. So again, deadline for appeals is February 12th for 2026. All the instructions are included on the assessment notices, and there are 3 levels of appeal. So the first level is the initial assessor review, where assessor will determine what's written on the grounds, have a look at the account, determine if a contact is required to that property owner, and reach out, understand a little bit more about why they've appealed, and make a determination whether or not the value should change. If a property owner continues to disagree with their that initial determination, they can continue to the Nova Scotia Assessment Appeal Tribunal, which is a more formalized hearing involving a tribunal member who will hear from the respondent, PVSC, as well as from the appellant around why the value should change or stay the same, and make a binding decision on that assessment roll year. The third level of appeal is more formalized, again, taking place through the authority of the Nova Scotia Regulatory and Appeals Board, and that's based upon a continuation of appeal from a decision of the Nova Scotia Assessment Appeal Tribunal. So our contact information is at pvsc.ca, included on assessment notices and here on the slide as well. Again, we welcome contact from property owners at any time, or certainly municipal staff and councillors through the appropriate channels. And with that, I'll say thank you very much and appreciate your time. Certainly happy for any questions.
Thank you very much. Does anybody around the table have any questions for either gentleman or Deputy Mayor?
Hi, thanks very much. I have seen these presentations before and always still learn a little more or understand a little better, because it's a lot to wrap one's head around when you aren't quite sure where your tax bill comes from. And certainly the cap has a major impact on what the numbers look like as far as what each municipality is dealing with. And you were, so I have a couple of questions about that. You'd run through a bunch of percentages, and I think I got lost in that that spiel on assessment increases. Everything from 57% an increase in assessment value, and then 8.4% specific to the town of Lunenburg increase. And I guess I'm wondering about what impacts us as far as when we're billing is the capped increase. So
Sure.
And that is what we have to work with as far as what we're going to set our rates according to. And that for every property is held to the consumer price index, correct?
Correct. So the residential taxable increase adjusted for cap for the town of Lunenburg is 7.2%. So the reason for that is because that's taking cap eligible properties into account, but it's not limited to 2.6 because there are some properties that aren't capped. So non-resident properties in Lunenburg would be the vast majority of what would not be capped, right? So folks who live elsewhere. You're correct, though, that the consumer price index, so all capped properties, if there's been no other physical changes to that property year over year, that would impact assessment. So constructed detached garage addition, that type of thing. They would see a 2.6% increase from the previous year's cap. So they just take the cap from the previous year, add 2.6%, round to the nearest 100.
So if there were permitted improvements to the property, that changes the capped number?
Correct. So the way that the math works in a nutshell is the consumer price index is added to the previous year cap, and then an adjustment is added after the CPI for the cost of the construction that's been added. And that's prescribed to us in the legislation that new construction has to be added to the cap. So it's sort of this, I think of it as sort of the principle that what's capped should be what's sitting on the lot, essentially. So if you add 500 square feet, then that will eventually be in the cap and have the benefit of the cap, but has to be added at the time that it's added to the assessment roll. Does that make sense?
So that's for individual properties, and plus in a percentage wise, when there are new properties or new assessments added to the roll, that adds to the percentage where you go.
Correct, absolutely. So if you had a vacant lot and you happen to be capped on that vacant lot, and then you were to construct a new property, the cap would be adjusted for that, but you would continue to be capped if you were previously eligible, as long as it benefits you. There are some unique scenarios that exist where an assessment and a cap could be very, very close or equal in sort of the first year. It depends a little bit on when the property was acquired, getting back to that base year and the sort of distance between cap and market. And often in new construction scenarios, the properties only become capped after they've been sold, if they're sold from a developer or something like that. But there are scenarios where someone constructs on their own property that they already owned and already enjoyed a cap benefit on, that would be adjusted. And in the case of new construction, adjusted significantly, of course. But it would continue to enjoy typically a cap benefit as long as the calculation was less than the assessed value, which it typically would be, except for a few sort of rare scenarios where the numbers work a little bit differently.
Okay. And the numbers are there, but I don't know if you were talking about them when you were talking about the percentage increases in the division between residential and commercial, because of course we tax residentially and commercially differently. So, and the rates are different. So, when you say, percentage increase overall, that includes, you were including both.
Correct. Yeah. So the commercial taxable increase was 4.3%. So that would be the increase to sort of dollars accessible to taxation at the commercial rate, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then that residential cap adjusted 7.2%. So really, if I'm thinking from a tax or a budgetary perspective, those would be probably the two numbers that I would be sort of thinking of, I guess, around the split, because that's going to help to determine what appropriate rate or rate changes there might be for those classes of property.
It's like peeling back the layers of the onion. You start at the top, that's your total assessment. Then we've got commercial, residential, and resource properties. Some are exempt, some are not. So you keep pulling it back. Some are capped, quite a few are capped. And you keep pulling it back, and then you find this is my taxable base. Some of the exempt, you'll get PILT or, or grant and lose and things like that. But essentially, there's a green on the slide with all the numbers. I think there was a green box that shows what's taxable. And that would be what sort of is the base of your.
That's right. I didn't read that, did I?
I was going to say, since you brought that up, I couldn't figure that out. I couldn't find the math that added up to that number.
Well, if you're to say, well, what can we use to calculate our tax rate on? That's where you apply your tax rate to that taxable amount, and then Mr. CAO and the CFO will look at, okay, now what PILTs and what grants are we going to get, and bring it all together in that big soup pot and say this is what your base rate must be, or what your rate must be.
Yeah, I just couldn't find the two numbers.
So the green one is the peeled back number after you take out exempt, after you take out sort of the
so it's not, I'm not going to find it
else
by adding up.
Just for your own interest, so the number of properties with dwellings on them in the town that are eligible for cap have been running between 81 and 83% over the past 3 years. Before COVID, they were down in the 70s, but everybody with that differential between CPI and market values, more and more people are on the cap. So a good percentage, although you're not tops in the province by any means. I've seen 90%, 91% of properties within the municipality that are residentially developed
And I
are
think,
eligible for
and I
that.
think
Makes a
in the
big
town of
difference.
Lunenburg, that would be that sort of higher value, non-resident residential property that we're all aware sort of exists in the town, right? Where folks don't live here and use it sort of as a cottage. And in those scenarios, you know, presuming we're aware of that residency, where they're typically not eligible for the capped assessment program.
Any other questions or comments for either gentleman? Deputy Mayor?
I'm sorry, me again. Can you explain that last comment you just made, please? Did you say seasonal residences are not?
I just said non-residents. So in order to be eligible for the capped assessment program, you have to be ordinarily resident in the province, which is 183 days for the regulations. So folks who are resident, some are residents, let's call it 2 months or 3 months in a good scenario, I suppose, typically are not enjoying a cap benefit on their property because we would determine them to be non-resident where they're, you know, receiving notices to another place outside of Nova Scotia. I'm sorry. One caveat that just because I've sometimes had questions on it in the past is you don't have to live in the property for it to be capped. So you can be resident somewhere else in Nova Scotia, but you must be resident in the province. So a scenario where someone lived in Halifax or Wolfville and had another home here that was seasonal, they typically would enjoy cap benefit or be eligible for the cap. But if they lived in New Brunswick or Calgary or Dallas or wherever, that typically would not be cap eligible.
And as a Nova Scotia resident, you can have multiple cap properties.
Yeah.
Which there's murmurs about that, you know, around the municipal. I know from the conferences that there's murmur, why can you have multiple properties on cap?
Yeah.
That's the legislation. That's why.
That's the legislation.
Anybody else? Councillor Strong?
Just down memory lane, I remember when the caps came in because we were having really unstable situation with people being able to afford their properties, and especially in this area because the market value was going crazy along the coast. So I really appreciate that the caps did come in at that time because it has ensured affordability for Nova Scotians. I'm sure there will be future discussions on whether it continues to play such a big role, but I just thought people might not want to know that it has been a very big factor in affordability.
Your worship, if I can, just to sort of provide the information, the NSFM has done studies along the way as well. If anybody around the council chamber here wants information on it, we administer the cap. So, but NSFM has done studies on the cap. We provide them information and data and stuff like that. They've done their own studies. So if you're looking for information on stat, because you hear it, is it fair? Is it not fair? Should it stay? Should it not stay? Should it change? Should it be phased out? And et cetera, et cetera. Well, they've done some studies. So if you want information, I'm sure the CAO will get you information through the NSFM if you want to take a look at that.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything? Deputy Mayor?
I just have one more question. And I was actually interested in you talked and your explanation on mass appraisals, like Lunenburg's a small town, as you pointed out, Paul, and so it's just, so how do you differentiate between the neighborhoods? And I was interested to hear you say that you actually have identified 6 different types of neighborhoods. So I assume, is that residential specific?
That'd be residential, yeah. So it's commercial neighborhoods. There's really, I hesitate to say one because there'd be different treatment for different properties in different locations within the commercial district of Lunenburg. I know because I've been sort of quite involved with it in the past, but there's really only one sort of commercial market area. But we have to remember that the way that commercial values are being determined are a little bit different as well. So the way that it works in the mass appraisal process is a little bit different for a property that would be valued on the cost approach or the income approach versus the direct comparison approach, because a lot of that neighborhood determination helps us determine the most appropriate sales for work within the direct comparison approach for residential property. So we're determining, what's the best fit to determine values or predict values for unsold properties using sales in a certain area.
I think, and to add to that too, Councillor, in most towns, size Lunenburg or, in that general area, Windsor, typically there were like 6 to 8 or 9 neighborhoods where you could sort of identify what were similar neighborhoods and properties of similar ages and so on and so forth, and where you could really, there'd be a good correlation between them. When I first started, I was responsible for Sackville. It had 40 some odd neighborhoods, and a lot of the rural municipalities would have between 30 and 40 or so. Geographic disbursement and the diversity of the actual areas within the larger geographic municipalities certainly beget more types of similar neighborhoods. Now, we may have trouble finding sales in those rural neighborhoods. The more concentrated, the more similar, the more volumes, the easier it is to make that statistical connection to market value movement. And through the pandemic, there were a lot more sales, a lot more movement, a lot more concentrated. So that's when the values started moving on the assessment roll. And sales are still out there happening.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I just have a couple of comments to make. One, I know there's great debate about the capped assessment and whether it's good or bad, but until they find a better tool to use, I think it's working for what it was intended to, what it was put in place for. We have approximately, as you said, 81 or 82% of our residential houses are capped. And I'd probably be willing to say out of them 81%, half of those folks, if they weren't capped, probably wouldn't still be living in town. Because, for example, I'd use my house. Since 2020, my assessment has doubled, right? But my taxes haven't doubled. And the other thing that I sort of wish was mandatory when it comes to buying or selling a house is that the assessment is explained a little better to the new purchaser and how it works, because it's not your guys' fault or our fault that someone buys a house that's assessed at $180,000 and they pay $600,000 for it, and a year and a couple of months after they buy it, their taxes triple and they blame us for tripling their taxes. We didn't triple their taxes. They paid 3 times the assessed value for the house, so they really can't appeal it because it's based on market value. So I'm pretty sure I know what your answer would be if you ask them what they paid for it and they told you. So again, I think there seems to be some confusion out there, and I really wish there was some type of check mark or something that realtors had to, explain to buyers a little more clearer than they do, because I don't think it's intentional by anybody, but I've had multiple people come to me because they know where to find me after they've bought a property here about 12 or 14 months ago and losing their mind because their taxes tripled when our tax rate actually hasn't went up. So I think that has to be explained a bit more clear by some. I think you guys do a great job explaining it. We try to explain it, but I mean, just looking at the chart here from 2022 to 2026, our assessment roll is 660 million and we're capped at 386 million. So would we as elected officials love to have the 662 to tax? We'd love that, but it wouldn't be fair to most because they'd be driven out of their homes unless the theory is you bring the overall rate down low enough that nobody pays really more than what they should. But until you can put a system in place that guarantees that's what's going to happen, they're probably, and no disrespect to elected politicians, because I'm one of them, but I don't think there's enough trust or faith in people in the elected position to do what that theory says we can do. So again, I thank you gentlemen for coming tonight. Paul for making that drive across. Again, that's commendable, because I didn't want to drive from Newtown really tonight. But anyways, thank you very much. And again, I think just the understanding of how PVSC and taxes work is more the problem than actually how it is rolled out. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. But if I can make one last comment about your point, And it's a very good point. We hear it often about the sales and the assessment and that type of thing. I made the presentation last week to a municipality, and the mayor is actually a realtor, and he asked the same question. And so I did advise him that we jointly with the Association of Municipal Administrators, Municipal Administrators sent a joint letter to the Nova Scotia Real Estate Association. I think it was in August, to say there is confusion out there, and you're right on.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, and have a safe trip home. And where it's late, I'll take another 1 or 2 minute recess. You guys are more than welcome to hit home.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Hear me? Okay, so we'll call the meeting back to order. Number 7 is public input and questions. We had nobody sign up tonight. Oops, sorry. I must say this new speaker system is working much better. Everything sounds like it's echoing when I speak into the mic. So move on to number 8, correspondence. There's just 2 items in there for information. One is about shared opportunities with Mahone Bay and Riverport with our electric utility that I'm sure staff will be discussing, and we'll hear more about at a future date. And number 2 is that we're all invited to the Lunenburg County Housing Marketing Study presentation being hosted by Modal. So again, if you can attend that, please do. If not, just it's fine. I think there'll be most of council is attending, so that'll be great. Next is public hearings. There aren't any. There isn't any business or unfinished business. So new business, we'll move on to 11.1, the fire chief's annual report. And before we go to the report, I'd just like to congratulate Chief Rumpke for once again being the chief of the Lunenburg District Fire Department. And I'd also like to congratulate all the officers that were elected here last Wednesday as well. I think that Lunenburg is very lucky, and we should be very thankful that we have such a dedicated and trained group of volunteers. That's the key word that some residents don't even realize. These men and women are all volunteers that drop everything, and leave their jobs and their families when that alarm goes. So again, on behalf of the community, I want to thank you and all your colleagues for the tremendous dedication and work you provide for us as citizens. Because if you want to talk about tax base or taxes, if we had to have a full-time professional crew of firefighters here, you would not want to know what that cost would be, because it would be but $1.5 million, the chief says. So yes, so add that to the roll and see what happens. So again, thank you very much, Chief Rumpke, and please pass along our thanks to all your colleagues as well. So you're up.
Thank you. There is no capital purchase for the fire department this year, so you're welcome. I guess if anybody read it, if you have any questions, fire away.
Does anyone have any questions for Chief Rumpke? I just like to say that it's great to get that annual report, just so we know sort of what's going on. I'm probably a bit more interested than others when I read it, only because I was a volunteer firefighter for 16 years. So and again, thank you to the fire department for not coming to us and asking for any capital funds this year. So again, thank you. That's greatly appreciated, because we have lots of places we can spend money, unfortunately. So that's all I have, Deputy Mayor.
Ditto on the thanks very much to our wonderful volunteer fire department. I just and I mentioned this before, and so Darren, you're going to have to bear with me. I know how much time, and I know that the time that members have to dedicate to training is really significant, and it takes real commitment, and kudos to those of you who put so much time and effort to be trained as you need to be to do that important work. I just wonder if we can figure out a way that I can understand how the training relates to the membership that we have. And I know it's a numbers game, but because it's really impressive numbers when you're talking about 289.5 hours of training for a total of 2,021.5 hours altogether of how much time people have put in. But it's just when we're talking about 545 members, I know we don't have 545 members, so I just have trouble putting my head around how the information is presented. But it certainly is. The main message is that it's really significant, and it truly is appreciated on our part, and it speaks to the dedication that's required to do what you do.
Yeah, I'll just explain that a little bit, because it was asked before, but it was assumed that if so many people attend so many calls, but every training session is different amount of hours, different amount of people show up. So if we had 75 different training sessions all year, it's the total of who showed up for each of them. And then there could be one training session, 1 hour, it could be 2 hours. So that's why it's not a simple thing like just adding your number of members, time, your number of hours for your total. So that's why it's same as fire calls and everything else. So.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? See you.
Through your worship, I think it's important for the community to understand that with the number of members that we have, your average member per call is 20.88. So to have 20 members or 21 members of the fire department responding to every call is an extremely impressive level and dedication back to your community. So again, appreciate the fire department, the services that you provide, and the volunteers for taking that time out and understanding the importance of emergency services for the community. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to add that when I joined or got in 1989, there was a waiting list and an interview process. And it was a real, it was a sort of a quite a big thing to get in the fire department. And I was fortunate. My father was a longtime member, so a lot of it had to do with tradition and so on. And we had 55 active members and probably 4 or 5 on the waiting list every year. And we're now down under 40 active members. So it's becoming harder and harder for those members that are actually stepping up and volunteering to be able to make everything they should make. And it becomes more and more dangerous because in a real fire, you need X number of people to actually do the job. So mutual aid is probably, more important now than it was 25, 30 years ago. So again, thank you to those 40 or so firefighters that we have. But if anyone's watching on like YouTube and would like to get an application, I'm sure Chief Rumpke would happily hand out papers here to apply to be a volunteer fire department, because believe me, there's no better reward than when that alarm does go, of getting down, getting your gear on, actually putting out a fire or saving somebody's life or property. So again, it's not like it used to be and everything. It's not as many volunteers out there. It's a different world we're living in. But again, if you want to get involved, I know the fire department would certainly take members. So again, thank you.
So I'm just reiterating what's in Darren's report. Another thing that I think requires or merits a call out, and that is to the employers. You mentioned a thanks to them for allowing people to answer calls, and that is absolutely critical. And so I think as well, it bears repeating our gratitude to the employers who allow people to leave their place of work to answer the calls.
Yes, thank you very much, because I totally forgot that. When I was there, I think we had 20 members from Highliner. So when that alarm went, Highliner emptied out pretty quick. I think now, if I'm not mistaken, we have probably 6 or 7 town employees. So I think that helps through the day, especially when they're here and the alarm goes. I think we still probably have one of the quicker response times for volunteer departments to get that first truck out. So again, that also helps a lot with basically preventing the fire from getting any worse, getting there quick and fast and getting on it. So again, thank you very much to the businesses, and I guess thanks to Paul and our directors for allowing our staff to leave at the drop of a hat if they can. So again, thank you. If there's nothing else, Darren, you can go home and watch the Leafs win if you'd like. Okay, so 11.2, Heritage Officer and Development Officer. There is a recommendation there, but I'm going to hand it over to Paul first.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to take this file just because it's got an appointment for Mr. Kiley. So before you, Council, tonight, staff are recommending 2 appointments. One is Alan Howell as a Development Officer for the town, as well as Mark Kiley as a Heritage Officer for the town. So with a small collective group of staff, it's important that we do cross collaboration and building a sustainable team, understanding that the roles are dynamic and fluid, and we want our staff members to be cross-trained in multiple avenues. So the goal of this under the legislation under the MGA section 243(1) and 19, if a G1 is for appointments of both development officers and a heritage officer. So again, cross collaboration and looking at shared services within the department. So at this point, staff are recommending the appointment of Mr. Alan Howell as a development officer and Mr. Mark Kiley as a heritage officer for the town.
Councillor Strong.
I just have one question, and I do understand the financial impact. Does this mean that these individuals can just walk into the role tomorrow?
Through you, Chair, there is still some training that needs to be provided. We're working with Modal on, but essentially with these appointments, they are direct appointments under the MGA, so they could start doing development permits and or heritage officer work. So within that scope, yes, they would be able to walk into them.
Any other questions? Councillor Strong?
I'd like to move the motion that council appoint Alan Howell as a development officer and Mark Kiley as a heritage officer for the town of Lunenburg.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Babineau. Any further question or discussion on the motion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Congratulations, Mark, and congratulations, Alan, if you're watching from home. So now, and if you are, I'm not sure why. So we'll move on to 12 notices of motion, information requests, and council reports. So we'll start this week to the left. Councillor Fullerton.
Nothing to report tonight.
Councillor Green. Councillor Babineau. Deputy Mayor. Councillor Doffney.
All right. The memory of the Holocaust is not a fixed legacy. It requires constant vigilance against the harm born of the hatred of the other. That's a quote by Khalid El Anani, the UNESCO Director General, as for today is International Holocaust Remembrance Day, marking the 81st anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz and Birkenau concentration camps. And I can remember we touched on it a little bit in school, but I don't feel we touched on it enough. I don't know, Jamie, if you recall some of the teachings that we had in school, but I also feel that it wasn't touched on as enough. Happy 65th birthday to Donnelly Tanner. Make sure to extend some birthday wishes when you see her at work at the Independent. The Legion will be serving hot hamburger, fries, and gravy this Friday from 5 to 7. Legion would love to see you. So would Councillor Strawn and I. You're going. Starting this Saturday and running for 4 sessions at the Lunenburg School of the Arts. Patchwork Shortcuts, a log cabin quilt with Marilyn Smulders, a beginner-friendly quilt course. I'm sorry, but even a beginner, I couldn't do it. Please contact the School of the Arts for more info. The Office of Equity and Anti-Racism is launching the first offering of the 2SLGBTQIA plus Community Impact Grant. Community-based organizations can apply for a grant up to $25,000 with a total of $150,000 available. Funding can be used to fund projects, support core and administrative costs that help organizations do their work and better serve underrepresented and undeserved communities. Please visit their website, oeaengagement.ca, for more information. And lastly, 51 days till spring.
Thank you. Councillor Strong?
I'll be briefer. So 2026 has started up again for me, and I've been busy going to meetings. Last week was a regular board meeting at the South Shore Regional Library, but unfortunately, Councillor Babineau and I had another meeting pop up in town for the Town Heritage Advisory Committee meeting and missed that one. I attended 2 meetings at Harborview Haven this week, and I'm going to the regular board meeting on Friday. Harborview Haven's construction project manager, and this will be particularly worth listening to for those out in the Zoom world, is planning to be in attendance at our meeting and has advised us that they, Greg Cardinal, will begin providing regular updates to share with us on social media about the progress of construction. This is a huge undertaking, and the estimated opening, I'm sure I have this wrong, but it's 2030. So this is going to be a long time, a long process that we will be working in partnership and sharing this kind of information. On Thursday night, I attended the Lunenburg Board of Trade AGM at the Lunenburg Academy. in the Lunenburg Academy or Lunenburg Lamp Auditorium. I am now the town's rep on the LBOT and look forward to future meetings. I was happy to introduce our Director of Community Development at that meeting, Mark Kiley, who spoke on the potential UNESCO corridor to connect UNESCO sites in Atlantic Canada from Rosemorne to Kedgie and including New Brunswick. I was happy to hear Darren's report tonight, and before the meeting, you might have seen him share a photo on his phone with me. It was a memory of a chimney fire at my house from Facebook this morning. And so there are some things that I have to say here as a result of that, as make sure you have a clear civic number and a clear and are clear in giving your address, because I think there was some confusion at the beginning of the call, whether I was on Lawrence Street or whether I was on Lawrence Street, which added to the confusion in my house. Also know who to call. I'm going to come up with an idea for the town, since we're not buying any trucks this year, to work with the fire department to produce a magnet, something simple. When you're in an urgent matter like that one, a chimney fire in your house, it feels like you're going to lose your only asset in town. You don't have time to think. So having that information right there would be really helpful. Have a family plan that includes pets, and get your wood stove chimneys cleaned annually.
Thank you. I just want to take this opportunity to, we've had some doozies the last two Sunday nights into Monday. So first, I'd like to start by thanking our public works staff for putting in the hours and doing the work they've been doing. It sounds like this Sunday coming up, we have another doozy coming into Monday. So again, I want to thank the public works staff that have been out I don't know when they sloop, to be honest. And, when you drive around and after the last storm, when you see how they cleaned up the town so quickly, you could get around no problem. Again, the staff back there really do deserve a big thank you. And again, I also want to thank the fire department and the volunteer firefighters that, number one, have had the warming center up and running during both storms. And the other thing is, I want people in the community to think about at 4 a.m. when we're all laying in bed and we're probably chilly and we hear the wind howling outside and it's -20 and that pager goes. Those guys and gals get up out of their bed and they go like crazy. They don't think twice. So again, thank you very much, because usually this is the type of weather that they do get more chimney fires and that type of thing. So again, I want to thank both those town departments for everything they do for our citizens. We are very grateful for you. So thank you very much. And that's all I have for my report. And we'll move on, I guess, items for consideration at committee of the whole. We already have our agenda for that. So that's February 3rd. So, that's open to the public. Next was the motion action list, which we dealt with at the last meeting at that point. So we'll move in and ask for a motion to move into closed session. Is there a motion? Moved by Councillor Strong, seconded by Councillor Fulton. Thank you very much, and stay safe and warm, everybody.